Hello from Listowel Writers Week. This year, we had hoped to welcome Monique Roffey to Listowel to celebrate her latest book, The Mermaid of Black Conch. Unfortunately, we had to cancel our festival, but we're very grateful for the kind invitation from Dublin Book Festival to collaborate with them to ensure that this event did happen. Thank you so much, Monique, and thank you to everyone at Dublin Book Festival. Enjoy, everyone.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to Listowel Writers Week at the Dublin Book Festival and our conversation with Monique Roffey today. Monique is the author of 6 novels and a memoir, publishing her debut Sundog in 2002. Born in the port of Spain in Trinidad, she was mostly educated in the UK, where she now lives, lecturing at Manchester Metropolitan University. Some books stay with you forever. And Monique's latest novel, The Mermaid of Black Conch, is certainly one of those. It's the beautiful, impossible love story between a mermaid, Akaya, and a fisherman, David Baptiste, who meet on Black Conch Island in the Caribbean in 1976. As with the best novels, it's about so much more, exploring themes regularly seen in Monique's fiction: racial identity, female sexuality, women as other, magic realism, and the environment. Margaret Atwood, no less, said of Akaya, not your standard mermaid, no comb and glass, no Lorelei hair, no catch and release. On that point, Monique, welcome. Would you tell us?
Yes.
Would you tell us how the mermaid and the fisherman come to meet? And then would you read for us?
Sure. So they, the fisherman is fishing. He's out with his line, and he's strumming his guitar. He plays an old guitar, and she pops up out of the water because she's kind of mesmerized and lured by his song, the magic of his music, and this goes on for a while. Her popping up and him going to try and see her, and then days later, weeks later, there's a fishing competition, and he's not happy about this, knowing this mermaid in the sea, and sure enough, an American boat catch her, and she's caught, and he rescues her happy to say, but there's much more to it after that. And I'm really happy to read from Aikaiya. Her name is Aikaiya, which is a Taino word, which means sweet voice. Lots of mermaids are known for their voice and their singing. So I'll just read you from the first piece of her voice in the book. I disappeared one night in a big storm, long, long ago. Island once where Taino people live, and the people before Taino. North in this pattern of islands, and west too. The island I remember was shaped like a lizard. I have seen the sea, and I have seen its glory. I have seen its power, the power and its kingdom. I have swum its angers. I have swum its misery. I have swum its velvet floor, the corals, the cities underneath. I have swum under islands. I have swum close to the shore, in shallow waves, and seen children playing. I have swum with slow steel canoa. I have swum everywhere in this archipelago. I have swum with large pod of dolphins. I have swum with shoal of fish, big like the size of one whole human being. I have dived into the walls of ocean, I would have died very soon as a woman. 40 cycles, children, husband, life of land and life of birth and death. Instead, I live for more than 1,000 cycles inside the sea. I was not alone at the time of my cursing. An old woman was also cursed, and she disappeared too, same night. Long, long ago, so long I don't know the time. Only that they called up a hurricane to take me far away and seal up my legs inside a tail. This is David Baptiste's journal, March 2015. Whenever I see the first leatherbacks arrive, I always feel happy. I know she, my mermaid, will soon appear, happy too, to greet me. I used to look out for her every evening from April onwards. She always knew where to find me, by them same jagged rocks, where we first catch sight of each other 1 mile off Murder Bay. Still a private place even now, since all them damn fish in the sea get fished out. I look out for Ikaia more than half me damn life. I've plenty women since those days long past, all kind of woman. Friend, baby mother, lover, but nothing ever like she. She was something else. I'm an old man now, you know, and sick. So sick I can't walk much, sick so I can't work, go out to sea, and so I go write down my story. I go sit down and drink a rum or two and drown my sorrows and drown my damn fucking heart in this bottle. After Hurricane Rosamond, everything changed, man. Every last damn thing blew away. And then 1 year on from the time we meet, you know what? She came back. That's it.
It's lovely to hear it read. There's so many voices. We'll come back to that. One of the many things I loved about this novel is the setting. So the village of St. Constance, the banana plants, the peacocks, the pothounds, even the rains.
Yeah.
Would you set the scene for us? I mean, you use a color palette that's very vivid. You know, the sky is described as with hues of ochre and violet. So if you just set the scene for us, Monique.
Yeah, whenever I go backwards and forwards to the Caribbean a lot. And I always know when I come back from the Caribbean and I'm on the Gatwick Express or something like that, and I look out the window and it's almost like the world has been turned down to like pastel, because it's pastel now. It's always pastel. Occasionally in the spring and the summer, we have really vivid blue skies. But in Trinidad, everything is brilliant primary colors. Things are absolutely vermilion or scarlet or banana yellow. Everything is very, very, everything's been turned up. There's nothing much that's sort of, you know, pastel colored anyway. But the setting is, so I spend a lot of time with people I know up in a very remote part of Trinidad called Grand Riviere, where there is a massive colony of leatherback turtles that come in every March. And I also spend time on the northern tip of Tobago, which is privately owned still. And for that reason, it looks like the Caribbean did 50 years ago. There are no big hotels. There are no big nothing. It's owned by a white woman and she's an environmentalist. But she's managed to save the island, that part of the tip of the island, to some degree. So it's an amalgam of places I know that are very remote and very small and very village-like and rural, where, especially in Grand Riviere, there used to be a colony of like extreme Rastas that were living in the bush, living in the forest, and they had a matriarch called Mother Earth. And her children and their children were all called things like life and breadfruit and a nicer country and better this. And, they had these sort of very non-Christian names. They were like extreme pagan Rastas. And so, you know, in the Caribbean, you don't have to look far. They don't have to make much up. It's all there. And I just, you know, over the years and years and years of visiting these places, it just becomes, you know, it's just there. Yeah.
The judges of this year's Goldsmith Prize singled out this novel as a blend of Moby Dick with Kafka's Metamorphosis. Now, given that that prize rewards creative daring, you've taken an old legend.
Mm.
So can you let us know what that legend says and what you did to the tale?
Okay. So like many myths, are pre-feminist and women are very binary. They're, you know, monsters or virgins or mothers or crones. And this old myth is about female jealousy and the cursing and punishing and banishment of a beautiful, talented, young, virginal woman. And it says that this woman, Aikaia, was bothering the women of the village by her beauty and her singing. And she was so alluring, all the men were paying her far too much attention. And basically she was stealing away the attentions of the men from their rightful wives and other women. And they went to the goddess Jaguar and said, what are we going to do about this? She's really bothersome. And Jaguar said, okay, I'll help you out. We're going to banish her to live in a hut with an old crone, which again, you know, the crone and the young woman, they're bothersome, aren't they? You know, it's very hard to get being a woman right, generally, and now and then. So they put the pretty young woman and the old crone together, Guanayoa, and they banish her so she's miles away in a little hut. But of course this didn't work. And the men found her because she was singing on the cliffs, and they found her. And still the men paid court, and still the men queued up to sort of try and win her and listen to her. And the women went back to her and said, look, this doesn't work. This railing works. So we need a stronger Ting man. And so they said, okay. She said, okay, we'll get rid of her. And she said to the women, go and do this ritual with the jaguar, certain types of seeds and flowers and things. In the meantime, I'll call up the goddess of the hurricane, and she'll just take them away. One will be a turtle and the other one will be a mermaid, and that was it. And you know, we're done. We'll get rid of them. And that's how that is the legend, that they just got rid of these bothersome women. And of course, my rewrite is because, you know, when you seal up a woman, you know, I could talk for an hour just about mermaids, you know. They're eponymous, they're global, we have them in every river and every sea. There are, you know, more brown and black mermaids than there are white, and they're all unhappy or cursed and ambivalent and ambiguous, and the object of the male gaze and da-da-da-da. But mostly they are sexually, like the Spanish say, you can't eat them and you can't fuck them. So they've got this kind of sexual like taboo. And so my rewrite is to give her a rite of passage, which is her erotic rite of passage, and to bring her from virginity into her full capacity as a lover and a woman. So that's what I wanted to do, really.
Mm-hmm. And why set the story in 1976? And you have David and Aikaia each telling their story from almost now.
Yeah.
You know, what are you up to there?
Well, I figured are scraps found, you know, as like a shipwreck, you know, they're scraps. So, you know, there's a mystery of how it all gets put together anyway. So the reader just needs to know that this is a composition of stories, and an omniscient narrator now, some diary entries now, and then some fragments have been found that she's written. I chose 1976 because the 70s were a time of revolution in the region, and that it was a time of Black power, of uprising, of nation building and feminism, and radical people around burning, firebrand speakers. So I wanted it to be that kind of an era, but at the same time, and a modern era. But obviously, I didn't want it. Couldn't be set today, because if anyone caught a mermaid today, it would have been, viral. It would have broken the internet, basically. So it had to be modern, where they might have had one of those Polaroid cameras, but there's no social media on the scene immediately. Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
As fantastical as this tale is, some of what they go through is the usual growing pains of any new couple.
Mm.
So there is comedy amid the cruelty and the hardship. She moves in with him, and David's commentary is hilarious at times. He was smitten, but she was messy.
She's a real messy boy. Yeah.
So talk to me about that. I mean, that's going to hit home with everybody.
I mean, I didn't want this to be the Disney cutesified, the mermaid is sort of this kind of like Barbie doll. She's a shaman. She comes from a shamanic culture who live and see everything differently. And I didn't want to compromise that. I didn't want to turn her into some Barbie doll. She is a woman who doesn't like to wear clothes. They weren't wearing clothes in those days. Where would she shit? How would she shit? It wouldn't be the grossest thing in the world for her. She's littering his bed with mango skins and she's got things under the bed, and she's hoarding, and she's not friendly. She's not easy. I mean, I just put her in, this is just how I fathomed her. She's not going to be, she's been rescued and she's been caught, she's been traumatized twice, she's sitting in this man's bed, and she ain't, not easy initially.
The story is a real mix of realism amid magic realism, I suppose. And she doesn't conform to ideals of beauty either. I mean, she fascinates people. But can you talk a little bit about what she looks like?
Yeah, so I wanted this whole thing about whether you pass as human, would she ever pass again? And so she is a Taino. She's an indigenous woman with red skin, and her eyes are very bright. That's sort of too bright. She's got these kind of like mercury eyes that are kind of like, and she's got quite sharp teeth, and she's covered in tattoos, and she has these sort of long locks that are almost dreadlocks, and she's also, she's looking at things, but her signifiers, what she registers, isn't necessarily what you would register. She's looking at constantly reading the sky and reading nature, and she's very good with his dog, and his dog doesn't like anyone but him and the dog. She's very comfortable with animals. She's very comfortable with Reggie, but she can't really pass, and she can't walk properly yet. So, she doesn't really like clothes. So she just lives in what she's given him, what he gives her. So she's, an unusual, she's a creature. She's human, but she's also very close to the natural world as well.
And Reggie is the deaf child, very interesting character of Miss Arcadia Rain. And she brings us to a second love story in the novel. Would you talk a little bit about that for us?
So I suffer from hearing loss on and off. So writing a deaf character was something I always wanted to do. And I found, so Reggie is also excluded. In the 70s, there would have been very little provision for someone like him, whereas in the deaf community in the Caribbean now have much more provision. So he would have been excluded, but Miss Rain has hired a hippie from California to teach him sign language, and the hippie has also taught him about identity, and also he has an identity as a disabled person, and she's given him this kind of the possibilities of being a poet, of found poetry, and of being proud of himself and not wearing a hearing aid and just being himself, and that one day he'll go to the deaf university in America. Everything will work out for Reggie, and he's got a certain kind of confidence about himself, which I really wanted to write a character with this disability who is cool, just totally cool, just he's cool, he good. He good. And of course, there is this white benevolent landowner. And I guess where I stand with this is that I'm slightly bored, maybe bored. I think the sort of crazy white woman and the bad white woman is it's just been worn to death. It's just like it's an archetype or it's become a stereotype. Antoinette from the Wide Sargasso Sea is like our white woman in our literature. And I've written lots of white people into my fiction over the years. And so Arcadia is just, I know someone like Arcadia. I know more than one Arcadia Rain. I know lots of white people who have property and land and who aren't crazy and aren't stupid and aren't hysterical and who understand their privilege, etc. So I wanted to show this woman what the end of the plantocracy looks like with this rundown estate that's way too big. And she has been parceling off pieces of land to the government and parceling off pieces of land to various tenant farmers. And the people who rent from her, the peppercorn rent, she barely collects the rent. Like the whole village is under her kind of ownership, but she's, that's too much, it's too big. The whole thing's too big. She has rainforest and she has seafront and she's basically closed herself up in this house, which is too big and it's tumbling down, and the peacocks and I know this scenario. I've been to this type of place numerous times in Trinidad alone. These types of places, these rundown estate houses where everything is too big, nothing works anymore, cocoa production is over, and I've seen at least a dozen of these places that are still, people live in them, but that's it. So I wanted to kind of like bring readers into this is what the plantocracy looks like currently, or this is what I see time and time again, a kind of dilapidated end of the cycle. And she's not so bad. And she has this lover, Life, who they met as children. And of course, the tragedy of being a child when you don't know what's wrong and what's right. And then you suddenly, so she's the only white girl in the local school, but she gets separated, and it's a lifelong love affair. And and he leaves her.
Sorry, go on.
Well, the her tragedy is again, she can't be transparent. Everybody knows her business, and she has CC is her family, and like everybody's related in this village. So
yeah, very Irish, Monique. Yeah. Cousins everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Everybody's a cousin family, And so she doesn't get to have a private life. Everyone knows that she's been horned badly by Life, and that he's left her with this deaf son and this big house, and yeah, she has a life.
The interesting thing to me is the kind of parallel between them and David and Akaya, in the sense that she's nearly cursed by her legacy.
Yeah.
And they're almost a different species. There's a class problem from his point of view anyway. He's ordinary, she's a landowner. Can you talk a little bit about that?
About the dynamic between Life and Miss Rain.
And also the fact that it brings in the history of the island and the idea of slavery, ownership.
Yeah. Well, it's a cursed love. It's a cursed love, particularly as she is who she is. I mean, I have written a sex scene between them, and I have written a post-sex scene between them, where he's just he leaves her because it's just too hard. It's too hard for him he has nothing to offer her, and she won't leave what she's got. And it's just too big a power structure between them. And so when they're kids, everything's fine. But as they grow to sexual maturity and adulthood, it's not fine. It's not fine for somebody who wants to fulfill his potential, which comes up again and again, fulfilling your potential. Aikaia wants to fulfill her erotic potential. Life wants to fulfill his potential artistically as a human being, as a man. So he leaves to free himself of this cursed love affair. But, love is love, and So when they first meet, she almost kills him. She's almost shot him because he's broken in. And it, you know, this. I just hope that I've pulled it off. That people can, non-Caribbean people or anyone can see the problem between them is a power structure, a massive historical one, full of abuse, full of barbarity, the worst possible humiliation for life. Before he was even born, this was a big problem. So it's love against it's a Caribbean love story, really. You know, it's forbidden love. How does a man of his caliber and stature and pride ever agree to this? You know, how can he ever agree to this problem? And Miss Rain gets it. And I wanted there to be some kind of like kickback. She's like, it's not my fucking fault. I didn't choose this either. Go, leave me, fuck off, you know, go away. Da, da, da. And then she says, you know, history or love, you know, I'm sick of the tug between one of them, you know, okay, I'm bad, you know, now what? Where does that get us? You know.
And it is history.
Yeah.
Like they're both born into where they're born into.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's plenty of cruelty in this book. And it's not just the men. It's not just the horrible Americans who come and catch a Kaia. So talk to me about that, and especially those ancient goddesses, those voices in the winds.
Well, there's, I think, so the first thing about the mermaid is that nobody's particularly kind to her. She's monetarized immediately. So the minute the Americans see her and they oh my God, you know, she's worth millions, you know, this is going to, the Americans are like, this is me done, you know, I'm going to sell her for millions and I'll make a life out of this. And because they think that, the Black Conch fishermen who would have normally just cut the line and let her go are like, oh, she's, yeah, money. And then, I don't know about you, but every village has a scold. Every village has a woman like Priscilla, who is like gatekeeper in the village and the village gossip, and she's not easy at all. You get on the wrong side of her, which is very easy to do, then things can be very difficult. And that's Priscilla. And I wanted her to have a complicated life and not be a stereotype either. But she's a bad woman. She's a bad woman who also wants to monetize and sell this mermaid. And she has this lover called Porthos. And they have a relationship and they have a child together, just like Reggie is a Life and Arcadia's child. Shortleg is outside child. And in the Caribbean, these hidden relationships are really common. Like somebody has multiple children from multiple men, or you're slightly higher up the social ladder, black, brown, or white. You might tuck the child in and pretend that the daughter is in fact, you know, this is very common. So you don't have to tell, you know, people have multiple children. So Porthos and Priscilla are, you know, also trying to sell the mermaid and capture her and get some kind of recompense so they can leave the island or set themselves up. And then there's the women, you know, the women have cursed her forever. She's not ever, they're dead long time, but the curse is eternal. And I just had to think about curses. It's like, if I cursed you, how long would that last? If I died tomorrow, would you still be cursed by me? That kind of thing. Yeah, so it was important that she had a little band of friends, but also there is a really big negative forces. She's, you know, the curse, the fact that people want to sell her, and it comes from white people, black people. Everybody wants to sell this mermaid. No one's particularly like, oh, it's a mermaid, isn't she cute? She's not cute. She's valuable. And of course, it has echoes with human trafficking, slavery, all of these things.
I was just going to say.
Where people's bodies, black bodies, red bodies, brown bodies are monetarized. And so there's a kind of like, that thing about who could torture who, you know. They don't see her as they don't see her as human. They're not looking at her. They're not seeing her as human.
one of the things that's really clear from the outset is the place of human beings as a species on the land and on the sea, and that quite often the elements are more powerful than we are. You know, the ocean whispers to the fishermen, take only what you need. Is there an underlying ecological theme?
Yeah, I mean, that's true of Archipelago, my other novel, another novel I've written. I've sort of co-founded a writers group last year. I've sort of been very active in Extinction Rebellion, and yeah, I mean, we have real problems in the Caribbean around climate change, and it's very much part of what I think about all the time. You know, in 10 years' time, people will be migrating by the hundreds of thousands from the region because it'd be too hot, and rising, you know, sea around everything. It's a terrible problem. So I mean, what I personally really hate is friends of mine, everybody who knows me, when I'm in Trinidad, oh, it must be, oh, you're in paradise, it must be so nice, oh, the lovely weather, it's so gorgeous out there. It's not. It's too hot, and tourism, climate change has affected the region really badly, and it's not this sort of picture postcard place. It's really really problematic. What tourism, God, everything, consumerism, everything is doing to the region. Sorry, yes. So there is that too in the book.
The book is full of arts and artists and music and language. You know, did it feel like a political decision the way you're writing in a local patois? I mean, political maybe a bold word, but you really put us there. And you know, Arcadia is referred to as the white woman.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the importance of, you know, Toots and the Maytals, Bob Marley, like all of that?
Yeah.
The love of, you know, just gorgeous.
Well, when I'm in Trinidad, I do know lots of local painters and artists and other writers and musicians. I mean, it's a small place, so life has gone to that metropole on the larger island, and he comes back, and of course people do listen. Reggie's deaf, so he can only hear really loud reggae, which he listens to on his, because of the bass, and he would listen to that, and he would be listening to Bob Marley, you know, in the 70s. So that's just part of the cultural backdrop of where they are and who they are, because, you know, these white people aren't so bad. I mean, some of them are plugged in culturally. Arcadia reads. She's a reader. She's got thousands of books. When she first encounters the white fisherman, she's reading Derek Walcott's first collection, In a Green Night. And so it's full of that, because it's a very cultured environment that I know of. I mean, we're great painters, we're great writers, great poets. We have 2 or 3 Nobel laureates that come out of a tiny region. I mean, we're incredible. We invented the steel band, we have Carnival, Calypso in Trinidad, a big film festival every year. I mean, people don't seem to know this about the region, is that it is luscious and it is productive culturally. So it's very much part of the book. And the language is the language. I was just talking to a couple of other Caribbean writers. I mean, it's not just how people speak, but our lexicon is full of words that we've invented. So a word like tabanka or wajang, or, you know, this is just common words, common parlance, we would say, is people. So it's just written in how people talk.
Can I ask you, this is the 4th novel you've set in the Caribbean, I think. Is it easier to write about home from a distance?
No, because I go back and write a lot. I'm there a lot. So it's not like I'm like writing from a nostalgia that I haven't been home for years and years. I go back all the time. And I sometimes go back for months and months, and I sit there and I write. I wrote some of this book in Tobago. Yeah, so I don't think that's true for me, but I can see that distance could help other writers.
I'm thinking of some of our most famous Irish writers, you see, who certainly did find it easier, I imagine. Questions of identity run like an electric current through all of your work. A mermaid's a very interesting way to look at that, isn't it?
Yeah, she is one big metaphor for otherness. Yeah, and I think she's a shorthand. I don't have to do too much explaining for her otherness, and she's gender fluid in a way, sexually ambiguous. She's red skinned but not black. She's very unusual, a marginalized creature, and innocent. And so she does so much work in terms of like political coding. I don't have to. So it is very feminist political novel about identity, but I didn't have to. Not much I had to say. I just let her get on with her life and get into all the conflicts that she was going to get into. Because a mermaid is such a strong unconscious archetype for otherness and fluidity and being cursed. She's ambiguous. So that just works for me. Yeah.
Do you think we're inclined to simplify ideas around identity?
Yes, I do. I really do.
I kept thinking of Walt Whitman's line, "I contain multitudes."
Well, I mean, I'm a multi-generational hybrid. My mother was born in Egypt. She spoke 3 or 4 languages from birth, and she learned English late. So my mum grew up speaking Italian and French and Arabic in Port Said, and moved to the UK when she married my father. Even my father's lineage, Roffey is a rural, working class, British, Anglo-Saxon name. My father's identity alone as an Englishman is complicated. And then they came out to the Caribbean in the 50s for 4 years, and they're still there. They never left. And my dad died there, and my grandmother's died there, and my mother's going to die there, and my brothers had children, and I've been writing books, and it's just so my lineage is mixed, and it's mixed, and I've inherited the mixture, but my consciousness has been Caribbean for a very long time, and as a white, I'm white, but I'm not the same color as you. Just look at the color of our faces. So I often, my consciousness and my skin tone have always set me apart from white people, real white people, whiter people than me. And I've written about I call myself other white, because there is an otherness about my whiteness. I'm not like a European white or an American white. And it's complicated, and also if you think about, I think I read somewhere that Europe is sort of like 8% of the world's landmass. And if you think that the rest of the world has, a large percentage of the world been colonized by Europe, there are lots of white people who have complex identities, who come from ex-colonial, come from Africa, come from parts of the world that have been colonized. And they're like me, they're complex white people who might speak certain languages and have an understanding of what it's like to now be part of something where whiteness is associated historically with horrendous mass crimes, and not be able to leave the country and still be there. I mean, white South Africans, white people who are native white people, anywhere where there has been colonialism. It's a complicated identity to have. And that's that's another hour I could talk about.
I know. Yeah. We'll do this again, Monique, for sure.
Yeah.
I just want to finish with a question about this year. It's been such a strange year for us all. And I just love to know, are you writing these days? And who are you reading?
Blimey. Who have I been reading? Well, I can't wait to get my hands on Courttia Newland's new book, dystopian book. It's called A River Called Time. I have been reading Diana Macaulay's, a Jamaican writer's book, Daylight Come. I am reading The English Patient for the first time by Ondaatje. And I read when I can because I teach, and I'm writing a crime novel set in the East End currently. So reading, and again, I think early lockdown put me into a kind of frozen, I was so terrified because I have asthma and underlying health issues that I spent April and May kind of in a state of being frozen. So it's been a strange year. What would I say? I'd say April and May were months of horror. My book was published early April and fell into a hole. And initially I was devastated, but obviously what's going on in the world is bigger than my book. But what's been amazing is that festivals have gone online. Other writers with very big platforms have swooped in to support me and other writers in this position. So I've seen a huge amount of generosity from other writers, and I think that's a great thing, especially from writers of color. They've just, there's a community vibe amongst, if you think about someone like Bernardine Evaristo and Nikita Gill, these are writers with massive Twitter feeds and enormous social media platforms, and these are women who've swooped in to give me a break, and a hand, like okay sister, So I've seen a lot of that, and the bookstagrammers have been out there tweeting, and they're really active. So the digital era has really, really been at its best, I would say, in artistic and literary circles in the last 6 months.
That's a great note to end on. I want to say a huge thank you to Monique and to you, the audience, for joining us. Usually at this point, I'd be reminding you that the author is in the foyer signing her book. However, The Mermaid of Black Conch is available to order via link on the Dublin Book Festival website and from its UK publishing company, Peepal Tree Press. And Monique's back catalogue is well worth seeking out too. I've had a great time. Check out the Dublin Book Festival website. There are lots of other events over the next few days. And many thanks again. Stay well and goodbye for now.